It was my birthday coming up, and I had a birthday party. He, knowing I wanted to get away, promptly tried to give me extra work, so I missed my own party. So I went on strike. I said, no, you do it yourself, and I'll go and work on the flying boats, because we were operating both at that time. So I saw the foreman of the flying boats, and he was very pleased to have me to work on flying boats.
Could you describe what it was like to walk into a flying boat? How did you get into it, for example? Was there a side door, and what would you see when you got in it?
There was a side door, obviously, now. On the main basis...
You'd go out by boat, presumably?
No, on the main basis there was a jetty, but generally it was by boat. You went alongside, opened the door, stepped into it, and to the right was the cockpit, and to the left was the main cabin. Before you got to the main cabin, there was a small area where there were 4 bunks, where you could have a sleep if you wanted. Then you got into the main cabin, which was very spacious. There's plenty of room between the seats. It was about 24 passengers. One side was a promenade deck, so you could view the scenery.
Were the seats in rows?
Yes, they were in rows.
Chemical toilet, presumably.
Chemical toilet, yeah.
How did you manage for food?
Oh, there was a galley. In those days, it was only rich people who travelled by air. So the food was in large vacuum flasks. And you used to get it, roast dinners, just like you'd get in a hotel. And tablecloths, and tables that came out from the back of the seat, and proper cutlery, not plastic stuff. No, it was all very civilised. And you only flew in daylight.
How many hours could you fly without refuelling?
Oh, 3 to 4 hours. And every night stop, they all both stayed at the best hotel.
In 1936, Arthur's social life blossomed. He came across an Italian girl who was living with her parents in Cairo.
And we used to hire these great big Arab dhows and go out for a day's sailing. Everybody used to take their own food, and then they'd all muck in. This time, one of them was friendly with a German girl, because this was before the war, and she was friendly with another girl who became my wife, and invited her along on this day trip to the Arab dhow. I always remember, when we decided to have a meal, she brought round a plate of sweet cakes, and I'm not very keen on all these sweet.
Egyptian cakes are hideously sweet, aren't they? Treacle and honey.
She didn't speak a word of English, of course. I didn't speak a word of Italian. I thought, what a charming girl. And I said, no, thank you, I don't like them. And she went back to her parents later and said, I met a very rude Englishman, because an Italian would have said thank you very much, even if it choked him. So anyway, that passed, and the next time I saw her, there was a big ball which I went to, didn't know anybody. And I saw this girl again. I thought, I wonder if she'll dance. I didn't expect her to, because she was with her mother, father. And I went across, and much to my surprise, and we danced all night together. So we could speak each other's language, but we got along fine. And finally we got married. Married 41 years, till she died of cancer. Then I married another old friend about 18 months later. And I was married to her for 10 years, and then she died of cancer.
In 1939, Arthur was posted to a flying boat station on the island of Corfu, just off the Greek mainland.
Now, Corfu had been an Air France flying boat base, and we used to go into Garuvia Bay. It was quite a decent harbour, actually, and there was nothing there, no buildings. We got there, and one night we had 2 flying boats in, and one that came in had a faulty engine, so we had an engine change on our hands. We had no facilities. Now, for maintenance on the water, there was a platform each side of each engine which you undid and lowered down, and a couple of planks underneath so you could get at the bottom of the engine. Anyway, a storm came up and it got rougher and rougher, and we were trying to get the hydraulic prop off and into an old Greek rowing boat, which was all we had to drop it into. And it was very dicey. The boat would go up and the flying boat would go down, and we were trying to... Eventually, we did manage just to get it on the boat. And I said, well, it's far too rough, we can't continue, go home. This was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, come back at 6:30 and I'll stay on and see the other flying boat off in the morning. Well, it got rougher and rougher, and at 6:30 the crew came down, and I said, I reckon it's too rough to take off. And the pilot said, I'm the captain, I make the decisions around here. So I went back to my office and stripped off, put on swimming trunks, and a pair of white overalls over the top. And by the time I got back, it had broken free of its mooring and it was banging on the rocks. One float was hitting the rocks and the crew were just about clambering on board. So they got on board and started the engines and taxied out. Well, one float had been badly holed. And I always remember in this violent gale with white-topped waves, and there was this flying boat in the middle of the harbour, ticking over. It couldn't turn round, it was too rough.
What the pilot didn't know was that there was a third mooring point in the bay, which had been installed only on the previous day.
And I wanted to go out in the Todd dinghy. At least I didn't want to go out, but there was no other means of communicating with the aircraft, which was with its engines ticking over head to wind, to tell them there was another mooring. And by this time my engineers had come down to carry on with the engine change. And I wanted a volunteer to come out with me, and they said, not really likely. So the only person who'd come was a young Greek engineer who I'd taken on at Athens. And it was very dicey, you can imagine. We had to keep bailing out, and we were trying to... We finally got near this aircraft with our little boat half full of water, and just as I was about to shout, he opened the engines up and blew us back again, nearly sunk us. And finally I managed to yell that if he followed us, we'd lead him to a temporary mooring. That took about half an hour to get back to the mooring, so you can imagine what I felt, and this little dinghy guiding him. We finally got to the mooring and they moored up, and they came ashore. And I was feeling terrible, and they gave me a glass of brandy, which I drank straight down and couldn't taste it. And of course, a few minutes later, I was violently sick. And we had to get busy repairing the float and the struts and the various bits that were damaged. So we had worked all one afternoon, all one night on the engine change in wicked conditions. Then in the morning on this flying boat episode. And finally, after a hard day's work, we'd done the repairs, and I said, right, you can take off. So I signed the aircraft out as serviceable and they took off. And then we carried on with the engine change. I was about 36 hours without sleep under appalling conditions.